You may remember in the last podcast where I talked about the benefit and power of excellence, I described a bank whose parking lot was full of the next door business's vehicles. Well, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, and I'm going to give you an update on that. I went inside the bank to make my transactions. I had to get a cashier's check or buying another actually refinancing a property. I'll be buying a couple more properties here. And I mentioned this to the bank. Of course, I waited till my transaction was done. This is a very important tip, is that if you've got a complaint or concern about a business and how you're interacting with that business, and I didn't know this until recently, handle the complaint after you got your work done. Because what a lot of times happens is you could be wrong, or the bank may not want to hear it, or the people on the other side of the counter may handle it in an odd way. But ultimately, I finished my transaction. I had my cashier's check that would cover closing costs for this particular property. It's getting refinanced and setting up for a purchase. I casually mentioned, hey, I noticed the parking lot out there is full of vehicles for this other business. Turns out that parking lot that I've been parking in for the last 5 years of using this particular bank is not owned by the bank itself. They have a little tiny dinky parking lot around the other side with no signage, 3 or 4 spots, and they are not actually owners or negotiated a deal or anything with the parking lot that's right next to their front door. There is literally, the parking lot I was sitting in to record that podcast was literally an eye shot from their front door. It was just almost an arm's reach from their ATM machine. And it's not their parking lot. So let me talk a little bit about the convenience for your customers. Part of Inside Strategic Relations is set up mutually beneficial relationships. The majority or the easiest business relationship is the one you have with your customer. It's not easy in the sense that, it works out every time, or it's just that's a very convenient place to start if you want to grow a business, if you want to increase your net worth, if you want to have more influence in a marketplace. What perplexed me, and we put in a complaint and we're going to raise that complaint up. What perplexed me is that I walked around after they told me that wasn't their parking lot, and I couldn't see a single sign that said bank parking and then had an arrow. I didn't see a single sign that said customers only or anything that would indicate that there was a parking spot other than the one that was immediately next to the bank and their front door. Now, I noticed that cars, and one of the things that is a strength area I have is I notice the human behavior. I notice how the grass is worn from the parking lot that's next to the bank to the ATM. That indicated that there are customers who park in that parking lot and then walk across the grass to go use the ATM. I notice there's a lot of cars that park on the road in front of the business. Now, this is just a regular 2-lane road, and that's probably not safe for customers. My concern is, and what I raised in my complaint, is that it is not clearly designated where customers would park. And from a reputational perspective, the spots closest to the door and the handicap ramp are not designated as accessible. And someone who needs that kind of access to get to the ATM machine, to get to the front door, does not have any clear indication that those spots are not the bank spots. So what the bank is allowing to happen is a liability concern under the American with Disabilities Act for not having proper access. There's also a reputational concern because the perception that this parking lot, and because I'm not the only customer that parks there, that this parking lot is actually the bank's. And there's also the opportunity for partnership with a nearby business to maybe get half of the parking lot as part of the bank's access and the other half for the original employees. Because if the bank is successful, the business will be successful. If the business is successful, the bank will be successful. They're right there. So when I talk about relationships with customers, why isn't the bank branch facilitating a relationship with the business to service their employees as customers, to partner on the parking lot to make it better and more accessible for both parties, and at least putting up some signage so that customers understand that that's not a bank parking space. Now, they don't have to put up a sign that says company parking only, because that's inconvenient to both parties. It could create bad will, but it might have a few reserved spots closer to the employment building or to the company for the employees, and it may have some reserved spots closer to the bank where there's an accessibility ramp. And that way both customers win. Now, someone who is in need of an accessibility ramp, they have a wheelchair, they have a walker, something like that, they're going to understand the spots closest to the bank are for the bank, and the spots closest to the company are for the company, because their interest is accessibility, not going an extra distance just because the parking space is designated for you. What I'm describing here is part of the critical thinking exercise that you must do as a high-income professional, as a top performer, as a leader, to find opportunities. So let's say I'm a lawyer who's handling a large number of ADA cases, accessibility cases. If I were to drive by this bank and not see any designated handicap parking spaces, especially in a location where there is a handicap accessible ramp, then I would have a great case. Snap some photographs and document what I see, come back in another month, snap more photographs, document what I see, send a discovery letter, send some kind of an introductory letter about the information, determine which side of the case you want to represent. You're opening up an opportunity for predation in the sense. There are individuals who go out and look for places they can't access because they've had a good success with lawsuits in that way. But just simply for the convenience of your customer, put up a sign that shows where to park. Now, it might be obvious to the people who work at the bank where parking is, because the available parking spots for the bank were majorly filled. I also understand that the business would not allow the use of the drive-through because they didn't want customers of the bank driving through the parking lot of the employees. That means the bank loses revenue and business. Now, the building itself is a beautiful building, and it has office space over top of it. But the parking situation is bad, so the office space that's over the bank cannot be leased out. So there's a lost opportunity there. So what's the solution? Well, you could work with the bank to create better parking. I don't know that there's space for a parking garage, but the business behind it could have space for a parking garage in their side parking lot. There's an opportunity to have better signage. There's opportunity to maybe communicate with customers. Hey, you may not know that we have a branch in such and such a location, and that parking is located on the left side of the building. Not the beautiful, nice, easy to get in and out of parking lot on the other side. Parking is literally in an alley with 3 or 4 parking spots and no handicap spots. It's just, you're going to see these types of things. So the more time you invest in understanding strategic relationships, the relationship between people and processes, the relationship between people and outcomes, you're going to start seeing these characteristics. Now, for some high-income professionals and top earners, they translate this into a consulting opportunity when they start nearing retirement. They start building up those case studies, and in their area of specialties, they position themselves as an expert. And then as they position themselves as an expert, they start utilizing a business, for example, as a tax opportunity, or utilizing a business as a means to receive additional or second stream income. And they start gaining influence in the market by publishing materials or communicating what they do. And I'm going to flip back to the analogy of the bank. The bank did have a perfectly good parking lot, which I was not parked in because I didn't know. What if you have a perfectly good skill, a perfectly good ability, a perfectly good area of excellence that customers are all around you and they don't know you can deliver? This happens in the workplace. You're grinding away, doing a wonderful job at your high income position. It's a little stressful, and people are loading you up with work because companies are downsizing and they're still keeping the good people, but they're making them do twice as much. And you're so busy that you haven't expressed or done any personal marketing in order for your supervisors to know you're even open to an advancement. Now, you and I know, of course, you're open to advancement, but they may not know. You may not have taken the time to look at your salary, your position. You may not have done what's necessary to position yourself in real human networks rather than technical social networks. And all this time you're putting into LinkedIn and all this time you put into Facebook, it's all wasted if the people who can hire you don't know that, one, you're available, or they don't know of your key skill sets. So just like this bank had a parking lot that was designated for the bank, and I'm being frustrated by sitting in a parking lot that's actually not the bank's parking lot, but it's full of other people, even though it's closest to the bank. Because I didn't know that, I had a bad impression. So let's wrap this up real quick, put a bow on it. You have certain skills and abilities and benefits and traits that are valuable to a marketplace. If the marketplace doesn't connect the relationship between their problems and needs with your ability to solve them, then you miss out on an opportunity. There are places where there are agreed upon solutions. There are best practices, yet the people who can benefit from those best practices are trying to invent some new way, or they don't know about these best practices, or they don't know that you could help facilitate them with those practices. But also that there are opportunities in the gaps that others have in their day-to-day operations or activities. And these gaps can be identified with a conscious, critical thinking of how people, processes, outcomes all interact. And so while I was upset with this bank enough to make a complaint, the complaint became a discovery to learn that they haven't worked with their neighbors very well, and ultimately it's hurting the customer. I'll carry the complaint with that perspective rather than the parking lot's always full all the time, because it's not even their parking lot. But if I didn't package that up and think about it, it could have just ended as a complaint. Now at least I have the opportunity for the bank to improve its opportunity or to improve its value to a customer, and there is some self-interest there because I am a customer. And it also positions the bank in a sense to work with their partners, to work with their neighbors, to work with the people who are immediate to them, because I'm not putting my full-size truck down an alley to park in a stupid parking space that has no room. It's just not going to happen. I will rather park behind the building than I would in that little tiny dinky alley with no signage that I have to blindly back into the street in order to get out of. Folks, this is why I invest the time and resources and effort to answer your questions. This is why I try to give you practical examples. This is why this bank branch has cut its hours, because it doesn't have customers there. Why would a customer want to go there and go through all that hassle? In fact, I'm even thinking about moving to the bank because they changed their criteria for fees. And now they are charging me $15 a month for a checking account, which is ridiculous. I'm going to leave it there. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. One thing leads to another, leads to another. If you can solve these small problems, you can solve even bigger problems. But if you allow these small problems to remain, you're going to miss out on opportunities. You're going to miss out on connections. You're going to miss out on going up to the next level. If you have questions about this or anything I cover, visit me at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Simply contact the office by fax or mail. That's the preferred way to get a really good answer from me. I'll invest time in you if you invest time in me, because I got enough private clients already. But here's the takeaway. I'm here to help you create and keep profitable customers and transform business relationships into profits. It is not difficult to find opportunities. The hard part is to stick to them and take them to fruition. And I'm here to help you do that. Thanks for listening. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. And there's a whole archive podcast at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Thanks for listening.